Hello and welcome to Mr. Thompson's Math Tutorials. Today we're going to be looking at the midpoint of two coordinates. Now, this is the midpoint formula, and it looks kind of big and scary. It's sort of, if we compare this to the distance formula, it has that same sort of scare appeal. There's lots of variables. There's an x1, an x2, a y1, a y2. We're dividing, and it looks scary, but it's actually not as hard as you would think. So let's have a look. If I look at this right here, I've got 2 points right here. Okay, so I've got my red point that's right here, and I've got my blue point, which is down here. And essentially what I'm asking you to do is find a point that's halfway between these 2 points. Now, of course, we can sort of eyeball something, so I'm going to use a green here, and I can sort of say, well, the midpoint seems to be about, I don't know, let me see, just about there, I guess. Just about there. That seems about halfway through. Now, that might be fine sometimes, and then in other conditions, it may not be fine. So let's see what we know. Now, we've looked at this problem before in the sense that we know how to get this distance right here, the distance between the red and blue point. We can just use Pythagorean theorem. So I know that my A side here is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I know that 7 squared plus my B side, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, plus 5 squared will be equal to my C side right here, which is this side right here, my hypotenuse. Okay, so I can square these. This is 49 plus 5, which is, let's see, that would be 25. Sorry, 5 squared. So it's 7 squared, which is 49, plus 5 squared, which is 25, and that gives me C squared. I add these two things together. This is going to give me 74, and that is equal to C squared. I can take the square root of both sides, and that's going to give me the square root of 74. Now, I'm not sure I can simplify this much more because I don't think there's many perfect squares in there. And actually, now that I've taken the square root of C, it's just C. Okay. All right. Well, I could say, well, the square root of C is 74, and I could just find half of that. So the square root of 74 divided by 2 will be equal to the midpoint. That'll be the distance of the midpoint. It's going to be, again, halfway between somewhere like right there. Okay, I could eyeball it, and I could maybe measure it. Here's a ruler. So I could measure and go, okay, well, let's see. There we go. Looks like it's about, let's see, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's roughly 8 centimeters. So at about 4, so my midpoint could be about there. But none of these things are giving me sort of an exact point that I can simply just graph. I can just put on there and say it's in this case 3, 4, right? That point is 3, 4. I can't really do that with any of these methods. So I need to find a better way. So let's look at this. There's my midpoint right there. I want to be able to find that exact coordinate. Now, if I think about it, this is halfway between this x coordinate. Let me put this on here. This x coordinate, or this first coordinate right here, okay, and this coordinate right here. It's actually, if I think of it being this, it's halfway between that point, this green point that I put right here, and my red point, which is right there. Okay, and I'm going to put another point. Let's make it blue. I'll put it blue down here. It's also halfway between these 2 points. It's between my red point and this blue point right here. It's basically halfway between those. Let me show you a different view of that. So if I look at this, you can see I've added these lines. I've got the red line right here. Let me make that in red so you can see it. My red line right there. I've got my orange line right there. I've got a blue line right here, and I've got a black line right here. And you can see that if I look at those lines, this is exactly in the middle of those lines. It's the same distance from the red line as it is from the blue line. It's the same distance from the orange line as it is from the black line. So it's in the middle of all those. Now, how do I find a number in the middle? Well, I find the average, or I divide by 2 in this case. So let's look at how that works. If I was to add together my two x coordinates, so let's say I was to take my first x coordinate, which is -3, and I was to add it to my second x coordinate, which is 2, and divide that by 2, that's going to find that point that's halfway between my x coordinates, which are my orange line here and my black line here. I mean, that's essentially halfway in between those two lines. Okay, and if I do the same thing for my y coordinates, I say 4 plus -3. Okay, and I divide that by 2. That's going to give me a point that is, again, halfway between my red line and my blue line. So let's just solve this. Okay, so let's see. -3 plus 2, I have 3 negatives and 2 positives. That's going to give me 1 negative over a half over 2. So I get -1/2. And then over here, I've got +4, and I've got -3. So I have 4 positives, and I have 3 negatives, so that's going to leave me with 1 positive, and again, that's over 2. So that tells me that my midpoint, the actual point that I would plot, would be -1/2. So in my x value, there's -1/2 right there, and then it's y1/2, which is right there. It's that blue dot right there. So this is essentially what the midpoint formula is. If you look at the midpoint formula, it is that. It's taking our x value, our x1, our x2, adding them together and dividing by 2, our y1, our y2, adding them together and dividing by 2, and then you're able to plot that point. So let's try it with this. So I'm going to use the big scary formula this time. This is my x1, this is my y1, this is my x2, and this is my y2. So I'm going to plug them into this formula here and solve. All right, so my x1 value is 4, plus my x2 value, which is 8. My y1 value is 2, and my y2 value is 6. So I'm plugging them into the formula, and I'm going to simply solve. Okay, so let's see. 4 plus 8 would be 12 over 2. And 2 plus 6 is going to be 8 over 2. And then I solve this. Let's see, 12 over 2 is actually 6, and 8 over 2 is 4. Okay, so let's see. I have these right here. So here's that graph. Let me just pull this out of the way there. Those are the 2 points. In fact, the red point and the blue point are those 2 points. This is 4, 2, 4, 2, and this is 8, 6. Okay, so I should be able to plot what I just found, and let me just remind myself of it was 6, 4. So I should be able to plot 6, 4, and it should be exactly halfway between these two. So let's see, here's 6, and then I'm going to go up 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And you can see that that point is indeed halfway between those 2 points. Okay, and that's how you use the midpoint formula. Thank you for watching.